A close-up reveals the sparkling blue eye of a blonde girl staring ahead. A girl in a frilly pink dress excitedly announces that the conviction event is tomorrow. The blonde girl admires her reflection in the mirror as she holds up a pink gown. Outside the grand dormitory of the Royal Remres Academy, a boy cheerfully gestures forward. Charlotte Silva, a 15-year-old Saintis candidate, happily chats with a boy about her plans for tomorrow's graduation party. She cryptically mentions that tomorrow is finally the conviction event. Hearing this, 17-year-old Rebecca Howard recoils in absolute shock at the phrase, conviction event. A maid nervously holds a rattling teacup, noting it is quite rare for Lady Rebecca to be this upset. Rebecca stares down into her tea and quietly observes that there is no poison in it today. Clutching her head, she asks her maid Peridot if consuming poison would actually bring her any harm. The young boy simply laughs off the crazy Saintis candidate's usual delusional remarks. A heavy silence fills the air as the gravity of the situation sets in. Staring out the window, Rebecca urgently tells Amber that this is an important matter and not a mere delusion. She suddenly remembers this specific setting, recognizing the conviction event as a widely liked trope in Japanese web novels. She recalls the common narrative where a low-status but beautiful girl filled with cheats captures the hearts of high-ranking nobles. When her maid asks what is wrong, Rebecca explains that these high-spec boys usually have fiancés called villainesses who bully the main character. Striding purposefully, she realizes that in this game, she is the villainess destined to be stripped of her title and banished for the protagonist's romance. Clenching her dress tightly, she declares she has remembered everything and that this world is actually her favorite otome game. Trembling with fear, she realizes the worst-case scenario is execution and that the conviction event is the trigger for all her humiliation. Lightning dramatically crashes outside the academy as the boy and maid look on in stunned silence. Sweating nervously, the maid is just thankful the etiquette tutor isn't present to witness this outburst. Putting the pieces together, Rebecca realizes the doomed lady getting convicted tomorrow is Prince Garrett's fiancée, which is her. Sipping her tea with her eyes closed, she completely accepts her identity and the fact that she has finished the game. In a stunning twist, she admits she actually wants to break off the engagement if Prince Garrett chooses love. Calculating her combined soul age to be 60, she reassures her maid by revealing she had a husband and adult child in her previous life. She tells Peridot she is fine because she constantly casts self-healing magic, seeing no point in continuing her act now that her memories have returned. Looking back on her past, she casually notes that she was a rather weird child. A tiny, wide-eyed Rebecca stands at the entrance of a grand hall as a line of servants bow deeply to her. Bewildered, the young girl wonders why everyone lowers their heads to the daughter of the Howard house. Seeking answers, young Rebecca approaches her father at his desk and asks for his attention. Denying that her nanny told her anything, she insists she is the one who wants to know the truth. Her father hesitates, feeling it is too early for her, but eventually agrees to teach her if she truly wants to learn. Unfazed by his warning about difficult words, she eagerly begs her father to tell her. He proudly explains that the influential Howard Marquis family has a deep connection with the royal family. Gesturing grandly, he boasts that their status, fortune, and long history rooted in the country's foundation allow them to do whatever they want. The young girl marvels and asks if her father makes everyone happy by using his magic. He smiles and confirms that their territory's residents are flourishing in happiness because of his magical power. Her mother gently adds that despite his noble heritage, her father has always reached out to the community. Conjuring a glowing orb, he explains that magic users provide for the people and control the territory so they can live in peace. He notes that while magic possessors built the kingdom, they are an extreme minority compared to the non-magical citizens. His expression turns serious as he states their ancestors chose to cooperate because the power of the majority cannot be ignored. Realizing the non-magical majority holds true power, young Rebecca understands she must live as a distinguished lady. She immediately faced a mountain of things to learn, including liberal arts, manners, and magic control. A fierce, fiery determination burns brightly within the young girl's eye. Driven by an unwillingness to lose, her magic flares out of control as someone desperately screams for her to stop. Surrounded by capable adults, she realized her specs were at the absolute lowest level without any cheat abilities. By her 5th birthday, she grew bored of her house's books and demanded more specialized reading material. At age 6, she boldly promised to pass her worst subject if her father allowed her to accompany him to his political affairs. Keeping his end of the bargain, her father arranged for a high-class home tutor. After quickly passing her piano exam, she elegantly introduced herself as Rebecca Howard at her public debut. A sharp-eyed man named Onyx is introduced as the first of 4 Kaguya intelligence agents serving the narrator, having transferred from her father's YMI spy group when she was 7. A young, confident girl smiles brightly as she concludes their negotiations, officially declaring that he will now work as her hands and feet. Onyx kneels devotedly to kiss the young girl's hand, formally addressing her as Lady Rebecca and expressing his deep honor to serve her. These elite shadow agents are explicitly tasked with gathering critical information, executing assassinations, and protecting her with their very lives. Rebecca stands proudly alongside her 4 newly acquired spies, Onyx, Amber, Peridot, and Jade, whose unique codenames are directly derived from their distinct eye colors. Amused by her eccentricities, her parents continuously entertained the strange young girl by granting her unusual requests. A wide-eyed younger boy gazes up in pure, sparkling awe, earnestly declaring his older sister to be incredibly cool. Having received a rigorous education designed to outshine any boy, Rebecca definitively realizes it is entirely impossible for her to live as a normal, demure lady. While casually sipping tea and listening to a report from the cheerful spy Amber, an older Rebecca suddenly has the shocking realization that she has reincarnated. Panicking and burying her face in her hands, she desperately wonders why she had to be reborn as the villainess and whether she has committed any crime worthy of conviction. Amber smirks playfully at his lady's apparent confidence while discussing the alarming fact that she is the primary target of Miss Charlotte's impending conviction event. Driven by a traumatic childhood as an orphan, Amber desperately begs Rebecca to become his master, promising to do anything if she just doesn't throw him away. Glancing down at the anxious boy asking if she is angry, Rebecca silently acknowledges that despite being a pain, Amber actually possesses a rather cute personality. Standing beside the faintly smirking Amber, a composed Rebecca sharply reprimands him, questioning why he insists on speaking to his master in such a disrespectful manner. She frustratedly recalls Prince Garrett warning her a half-year ago to stop interfering with Miss Charlotte, despite Rebecca only correcting the girl's highly problematic behavior as her senior. Unbothered by the tension, Amber touches his face and flashes a dazzling, carefree smile while proudly boasting about his own sheer brilliance. Rebecca acutely deduces that Amber has already analyzed the situation and confirmed her involvement, confronting him directly about his suspiciously accurate reporting. Flanked by her quiet maid Peridot and the thoughtful Amber, Rebecca crosses her arms in the grand hallway and seriously ponders her next strategic move. She pieces together that her strange, eccentric childhood behavior was entirely influenced by the sunken, latent memories of her previous life in Japan finally surfacing. A flashback shows a tiny Rebecca confusing the locals with modern Japanese concepts like cram schools and exam wars, definitively proving her reincarnated soul boasts a total spiritual age of 60. In her previous life, she and her beloved husband happily went on an overseas trip after finally seeing their son become a fully independent adult. She vividly and grimly recalls that her previous life abruptly ended in a fatal accident during that very trip at the age of 43. Typing diligently at an office computer, her past self reflects on being just an ordinary person blessed with a proper job and a deeply loving husband. Though she considers her past life wonderfully fulfilling, she tearfully confesses that she still carries lingering regrets, constantly worrying if her husband is surviving without her. Before regaining her memories, she had dutifully accepted her noble marriage of convenience, but now, harboring a deep desire for real love, a loveless arrangement feels entirely impossible. Staring coldly at an image of her handsome fiancé, the second Prince Garrett, she fiercely resolves that being with another person is completely unacceptable given her retained memories. She astutely pieces together that Miss Charlotte is actively pursuing the prince's capture route, meaning Rebecca's own devastating conviction event is rapidly approaching. Recognizing that Garrett has grown increasingly distant while getting intimate with Charlotte, Rebecca is horrified by the looming prospect of a broken engagement leading to her ultimate downfall. Slamming her fist down with sheer, unyielding determination, she decisively abandons despair and chooses to enact a ruthless strategy of reverse karma. Shivering with rage, she aggressively refuses to accept a forced divorce, monastic exile, or a bloody execution simply because it is the predetermined scenario of a foolish otome game. Amber curiously questions Rebecca's unexpected bitterness, probing to see if she called them there because she is genuinely afraid of the crazy saintess candidate taking her royal position. The deadly maid Peridot steps forward with chillingly empty eyes, calmly offering to assassinate the targets immediately, but Rebecca firmly and quickly denies the bloody request. Instead of resorting to murder, Rebecca proudly declares her intent to properly attend tomorrow's graduation party, acting as the fully dignified daughter of the Howard house. Knowing she must face Miss Charlotte directly to forcefully end this game's plot, she urgently commands her intelligence team to begin laying the necessary groundwork. Refusing to ever turn the other cheek, she ruthlessly plans to hijack the narrative by preemptively breaking off the royal engagement with Prince Garrett herself. Setting her master plan into immediate motion, a resolute Rebecca turns her intense gaze to Amber and tasks him with running a critical errand to the townhouse. Amber casually brushes his hair back, easily accepting the noble lady's firm insistence with a relaxed, almost lazy compliance. Rebecca smiles warmly with her eyes closed, affectionately teasing him as a cold cat while playfully acknowledging his unwavering, underlying loyalty. An expansive exterior view highlights the grand, sprawling architecture of the opulent noble estate where the shadows silently operate. Turning to Peridot at the writing desk, Rebecca strictly instructs her to prepare the setup, officially confirming she has absolutely zero intention of marrying Prince Garrett. Gazing solemnly into the distance, she openly acknowledges that the original version of herself in this game world was incredibly greedy for love and highly monopolizing. Her original self would have fiercely threatened immediate divorce over any cheating, a stark contrast to her previous life where she experienced true, securely mutual love. A beautiful flurry of light highlights the deeply cherished memories of exchanging numerous, incredibly special declarations of love with her former husband. As her delicate hands expertly press a wax seal onto a formal letter, she somberly admits that the profound feeling of her past love remains permanently engraved into her soul. The panel narrows sharply onto the focused, intensely determined eyes of both the loyal maid and her master as they silently finalize their bold strategy. Smiling with serene, unshakable confidence, Rebecca reassures Peridot that she plans to enjoy a completely relaxing, self-sufficient life after successfully destroying her royal engagement. Experiencing a sudden wave of total satisfaction, she marvels as an entirely new, liberated future outside of being the crown princess opens up brightly before her eyes. While being tightly laced into an elaborate gown, she cringes in sheer disgust at the nauseating thought of devoting her body and soul to a political partner she does not even like. The dedicated maid meticulously applies delicate makeup to Rebecca's lips, expertly and silently preparing her master for the impending social battlefield. Sliding a beautiful sunflower hairpin into her blonde hair, a gorgeous and battle-ready Rebecca vows to aggressively shake off the surrounding sparks and completely crush Miss Charlotte. The next day at the graduation party, Rebecca realizes with mild disgust that Prince Garrett wrapped her entirely in his own signature colors of green and golden sunflower, only to suddenly abandon his escort duties. Stepping in to guide her instead is David Howard, Rebecca's 15-year-old younger brother currently enduring his adolescent phase while studying at Remres Academy. David formally extends his hand by the carriage and calls out to his sister, leaving Rebecca staring blankly in utter confusion at his unexpected arrival. Closing her eyes with a quiet scoff, Rebecca accepts this blatant game rectification and realizes Prince Garrett is completely unconcerned with her since he left her sunny stage escort duties to her younger brother. Sighing softly, she wonders if her brother will compliment her dress just for the sake of manners, reminding herself that they are still trapped inside an Otome game. Realizing she has also been considerably insensitive in her own right, she silently accepts that she has no other choice but to play along. Despite looking visibly annoyed, David dutifully praises her attire by claiming the dress is incredibly fitting for his sister. She thanks him graciously while internally panicking, desperately wondering if his compliment meant she looked fitting for graduation or for her impending conviction event. The sibling duo makes a stunning entrance as they gracefully walk arm in arm down the grand ballroom stairs. Glancing nervously at her brother, Rebecca worries about the classic trope where relatives get dragged into the villainess's sins, hoping her former sister's boy will somehow be alright. She reflects on a major romance flag from months ago when Prince Garrett personally gifted Miss Charlotte a new dress after she ruined her original one. Gifting a dress holds deep romantic significance, yet Rebecca remained completely silent when Garrett previously gifted her a gown for the graduation ceremony. Looking back on her distinct lack of reaction, a sudden realization entirely shifts her perspective on their supposed romance. Remembering how she calmly ignored his advances, the fiercely monopolizing woman officially concludes that she truly never loved him. Prince Garrett stands tall and elegant, looking every bit the perfect royal fiancé he was designed to be. Clad in his crisp formal uniform, his golden hair and brilliant blue eyes perfectly highlight his incredible innate beauty. Analyzing him objectively as a highly stanable character, Rebecca politely greets His Highness and compliments his wonderful appearance. She coldly surveys the other male capture targets, noting the fiery knight Brandon Garcia and the magically gifted Evan Hawke, the latter of whom is already engaged. Rebecca notes that these targets strangely lack their overpowered cheat settings, wondering if reality is dulling their high specs since almost all of them already possess lovers or fiancés. As Prince Garrett officially apologizes for failing to escort her, Rebecca highly suspects some unseen power is actively dragging the game's settings closer to harsh reality. Despite genuinely loving the original web novel this world is based on, she nervously admits there are still glaring gaps in her knowledge. Because the Lendor Kingdom blends Otome logic with the realistic common sense of her 43-year past life, she knows a highly public conviction event will inevitably force her to self-destruct. Taking drastic preemptive action, she turns to Prince Garrett and firmly insists he dance the second song with another lady. Exhausted by the tension and wondering if the event will even start, she completely surrenders her rightful place for the second dance to the other eager ladies. The surrounding noblewomen immediately agree to her shocking proposal, claiming they understand her generous intentions perfectly well. The gossiping noblewomen quickly surround her, with Lady Samantha boldly declaring that Rebecca requires absolutely no additional princess lessons since she was heavily educated by the esteemed Mrs. Comins. The adoring girls crowd around to deeply thank Lady Rebecca for guiding their confident social debuts, bringing a relieved smile to her face. The cheerful atmosphere instantly shifts to frantic panic as the girls frantically warn each other to calm down before the terrifying Mrs. Comins spots them misbehaving. Peeking quietly around a grand pillar, Rebecca silently watches the girls and heavily agrees that this situation is truly a troublesome matter. She reflects on the immense pressure of Remres Academy's elite education, noting that the royal palace's best tutor only took the teaching job specifically for the future crown princess. Glaring across the room, she spots a blatant breach of etiquette as Miss Charlotte and Prince Garrett completely refuse to separate while everyone else changes dance partners. The self-proclaimed heroine of this twisted game, the wide-eyed baron's daughter Charlotte Silva, shamelessly monopolizes the prince's attention. Rebecca's heart absolutely pounds in her chest as she intensely questions if the dreaded conviction event is finally about to begin. A blatantly cliché romance scene actively unfolds in the dimly lit corner of the grand ballroom, right at the base of the sweeping staircase. Charlotte smiles brightly up at the prince, fully establishing herself as the undeniably triumphant lead of this romantic scenario. Hiding her wicked smirk behind an elegant fan, Rebecca notes Prince Garrett's visibly troubled expression and playfully wonders if Charlotte lacks the necessary affection points. Ignoring all noble decorum, Charlotte steps aggressively forward and tightly hugs the visibly stiff prince's arm. The surrounding noblewomen completely lose their composure, furiously demanding Lady Sophie to calm down as they loudly gasp at Charlotte's incredibly inappropriate and inviting gesture. Watching the absolute chaos unfold, a deeply exhausted Rebecca closes her eyes and silently curses the entire situation as such a massive pain. Sweating nervously while raising a hand, Prince Garrett weakly attempts to pull away, but his tacit resistance only seems to make the aggressive heroine cling tighter. The murmuring crowd harshly judges the prince for blatantly ignoring his fiancée, panicking that the highly anticipated second dance is going to start while he remains trapped. Realizing she was utterly naive to expect any good sense from her rival, Rebecca discreetly turns to a maid and requests a full report on Miss Charlotte's current reputation. The resulting gossip paints a highly disturbing picture, officially branding Charlotte as an eccentric, lying girl and a completely crazy saintess candidate. An intelligence maid dutifully returns with a stack of papers, heavily confirming the dark rumors she collected from the Academy's other workers regarding Miss Charlotte. The maid formally reports her findings to a seated Rebecca, fully confirming the terrifying truth that Charlotte is indeed a highly coveted saintess candidate. The loyal maid hesitates with a deeply concerned expression, swearing to provide only the most accurate information regarding this highly delicate matter. In this magical world, only women possessing the light attribute become saintess candidates, leaving the water and healing specialized Rebecca completely out of the divine running. Snapped back to reality, Rebecca wildly panics as she catches her younger brother glaring daggers at her, desperately begging the universe not to turn David into an enemy. She notes that an awakened saintess is highly revered for bringing massive wealth to the kingdom, making it incredibly shocking that society actively considers Charlotte to be crazy. Ultimately, Rebecca firmly realizes that despite existing within a foolish otome game, the unyielding, Spartan standards of the super-elite Royal Remres Academy will brutally punish any major social transgressions. As Charlotte swoons, Rebecca notes that she understands perfectly why people make such disparaging remarks about her. She silently urges the girl to develop some basic self-awareness. The Royal Remres Academy is the Lendor Kingdom's premier educational institute, designed strictly to shape youths into fitting aristocrats. Students spend 3 years here, from age 15 to 17, mastering magic, etiquette, and societal lectures. Sending a child to the Remres Academy is a definitive proof of status amongst the aristocracy, heavily boasted about with unconcealed pride. Some desperate houses even plunge into crippling debt just to secure their children's enrollment. Consequently, being a student at this prestigious academy carries a multitude of heavy, inescapable responsibilities. Returning to the present crisis, Rebecca prepares to explain exactly what is so bizarre about Miss Charlotte's behavior on the dance floor. Generally, a noble only dances with a specific partner once per ball, with a second song reserved exclusively for fiancés. By dancing a second time right in front of Garrett's actual fiancé, the pair implicitly picked a very public fight. Rebecca tightly grips her ornate fan, maintaining a veneer of perfect aristocratic composure against the blatant insult. In the grand ballroom, the conductor leads the orchestra while oblivious noble couples continue to waltz gracefully. Observing the dance, Rebecca notes that Prince Garrett is visibly panicking, leading her to guess he was reluctant to agree to this second song. A subtle, calculating smirk graces Rebecca's lips as she watches the royal heir struggle on the dance floor. She dryly muses that despite his royal status, Garrett's future as a leader is highly questionable if he cannot even handle one woman properly. As the panicked conductor shoots her a desperate glance, Rebecca offers a serene smile and silently denies his unspoken request to intervene. She silently orders the conductor to end the song subtly to avoid attracting unnecessary attention or aggravating the situation. Meanwhile, the surrounding crowd gossips about the insult dealt to Lady Rebecca, eagerly wondering how the Academy's Moon Princess will retaliate. Nearby, several young noblemen watch the spectacle unfold with tense, heavily guarded expressions. The young men gathering closely around Prince Garrett are candidates for his future aides, likely stepping in to minimize any potential scandals. However, Rebecca sharply questions if their defensive formation is genuinely for the prince, or if they are doing this in order to help Miss Charlotte. As the crowd whispers, Rebecca calculates that if the aides are simply protecting their future lord from scandal, the resulting blame will be manageable. However, if they are shielding Charlotte for personal reasons, the consequences will be severe. Specifically, if the surrounding nobles realize these future aides have been charmed by the girl, their reputations will fall drastically. Ironically, Rebecca realizes that her ability to so calmly assess this humiliating situation also puts her own reputation in significant danger. Breaking down in tears would lower her social evaluation, as a woman who does not fight back when openly challenged quickly becomes a target for sinister bullying. Ultimately, showing such weakness means she won't be able to survive in the ruthless social world. Looking at the pouting Charlotte, Rebecca notes that the girl's self-centered actions have dragged everyone around her into a completely disadvantageous situation. Although she is fully prepared to break off her engagement and withdraw to her territory, it is strictly against her principles to ignore a fight that has been picked with her. The surrounding guests continue to whisper, noting that Lady Samantha and Miss Sophie are standing as support for Lady Rebecca. They gossip further, pointing out that Samantha just got engaged to Sir Evan while Sophie is Sir Brandon's lover. Snickering onlookers eagerly anticipate Rebecca's next move, noting that confronting Charlotte directly would be immensely troublesome. Furthermore, if Rebecca dares to openly blame Prince Garrett, it would be considered treason against royalty. The 10 students realize everyone in their small social world is paying close attention to their reactions, turning this crisis into an unexpected field test on their graduation day. Deeply annoyed, Rebecca curses her own naive thinking for assuming this would be a simple, one-sided conviction event. From the absolute bottom of her heart, she finds this entire ordeal to be a massive pain in the ass. Plastering on a flawless smile, Rebecca steps forward to praise their wonderful dance, silently resolving to clean up this messy situation. With a light chuckle, she gracefully suggests that Baroness Silva's dress sleeve simply got stuck to His Highness's clothing. She pleasantly adds that this kind of minor problem will just remain as a good memory for the day, cornering the prince into a response. Switching to a private transmitted voice, Rebecca coldly informs the prince that their passionate snuggling has made him the subject of incredibly negative attention. She warns him that this disgraceful display will be left clearly in everyone's memory. Rebecca calculates that settling this peacefully allows them to cooperate on the engagement annulment later, while triggering the conviction event now lets her annul it immediately while preserving her reputation. Regardless of the path chosen, the ultimate annulment of their engagement has already been decided. To her mild surprise, Prince Garrett enthusiastically goes along with her excuse, loudly claiming it is a relief Miss Charlotte's dress wasn't damaged. He nervously insists it wouldn't be good to ruin the atmosphere, choosing to treat the entire scandalous dance as a mere accident. Seizing the momentum, Rebecca decides to firmly steer the narrative to ensure the conversation doesn't accidentally wander back in the wrong direction. Laughing like a perfect noblewoman, Rebecca publicly warns Garrett that she will get jealous if they dance twice, excusing it this time due to circumstances. Simultaneously, she uses her transmitted voice to command him to step down, warning him not to act in a way that makes his fiancée despise him in public. Through his transmitted voice, Garrett frantically insists he never intended for things to turn out like this. Rebecca is slightly impressed that her fiancé of 3 years properly understood the lethal threat she meant to convey. As Garrett tries to stutter out an apology, Rebecca coldly cuts him off, feeling it is far too late for him to try and act intimate at this point. With her masterful manipulation, everything is finally set perfectly in place. The massive scandal has been successfully downgraded into a mere squabble between fiancés, framing Garrett as calming down his cutely jealous partner. Suddenly, the fragile peace shatters as Charlotte throws a tantrum, screaming that Prince Garrett is here today specifically to break off his engagement with Lady Rebecca Howard. The surrounding noblewomen freeze in absolute horror, their eyes wide as the scandalous declaration echoes across the silent ballroom. A collective, deafening gasp rips through the high society crowd at the sheer audacity of the commoner's outburst. Standing perfectly still, Rebecca closes her eyes as Miss Charlotte's sharp, unrefined voice resonates painfully throughout the entire ballroom. Oblivious to the tension, Charlotte mocks Rebecca, claiming His Highness will act as if their engagement never happened. When met with silence, the girl haughtily asks if Rebecca heard her, prompting quiet snickers from the shadowed crowd. Whispers explode across the room as guests question if this is just the Baroness speaking out of turn, realizing that annulling the Moon Princess's engagement during the graduation party is a massive scandal. Despite the chaos, the orchestra conductor desperately tries to play a calm, soft song to dispel the awkward silence. Rebecca silently sends her compliments to the man for his incredible professionalism in the face of such absolute disaster. Sweating profusely, Prince Garrett finally steps in, weakly telling Lady Silva that this is not the proper place to have that type of conversation. However, Rebecca's sharp mind immediately catches the fatal flaw in his weak reprimand. His Highness did not actually deny the annulment. Internally, Rebecca remains completely unfazed, noting that since she has regained the memories of her past life, she has absolutely no intentions of getting married anyway. She genuinely has no problem if Prince Garrett wants to spend his life tied to this impetuous child. In fact, she sincerely plans to wish for their continued happiness. Slowly opening her eyes, the Moon Princess prepares to deliver her final, crushing response to the foolish couple. However, she refuses to be the one painted in the wrong, especially when she is being attacked with completely false charges. Since Charlotte forcibly started this ridiculous conviction event, Rebecca resolves to make the girl take full responsibility, doubting if Prince Garrett will ever be able to maintain his royal dignity after this farce. Rebecca notes the genuine affection between them, fully intending to proceed through the formal procedures. Trembling obliviously, Charlotte fails to realize why His Highness formally addressed her as Lady, blindly claiming that Prince Garrett is furiously angry about the grave harassment Rebecca has supposedly put her through. Meanwhile, Rebecca shrewdly observes that the prince is awkwardly trying to pull his hand away from the clinging girl. Charlotte shrieks that Rebecca maliciously bullied her out of pure jealousy over her good relations with Prince Garrett, begging the noblewoman not to play innocent. Maintaining her flawless composure, Rebecca calmly and categorically denies ever committing any such acts of harassment. The surrounding noblemen gasp in sudden shock as Charlotte confidently declares that Sir Evan, Sir Brandon, and even Lord David are entirely on her side. Panicking internally, the young lords frantically try to push the lowest-titled Brandon into the spotlight while begging David to do something, desperate to protect Evan's future. As His Highness's right arm observing their terrified trembling, Rebecca perceptively deduces that these boys are actually not her enemies. Stepping forward as the designated scapegoat, A trembling Sir Brandon weakly attempts to stop Miss Charlotte, prompting a confused noise from the girl. Rebecca watches the pathetic display with dry amusement, silently cheering for the poor boy to hang in there. Charlotte tilts her head with an innocently confused hum, her large eyes blinking in complete bewilderment at the sudden lack of support. Completely misunderstanding the tension, Charlotte acts ridiculously coy, swooning over the boys supposedly fighting over her, which only deeply exasperates Rebecca. Rapidly pivoting back to her accusations, Charlotte wildly claims her possessions have been stolen, broken beyond use, and her dress is ruined, tragically preventing her from attending parties. Glaring with venomous intensity, Charlotte fiercely accuses Rebecca of hiring violent thugs to attack her, screaming that she surely hasn't forgotten such a heinous crime. Rebecca realizes Charlotte is dangerously unaware of her position, screaming these scandalous accusations right in the solemn presence of His Majesty. The ballroom is filled with ambitious families desperate to make their daughters princess, and they would ruthlessly weaponize these exact scandals to drag down their political rivals. Releasing a heavy, exhausted sigh from behind her elegant fan, Rebecca realizes the situation has escalated too far. She calculates that she must reluctantly throw Miss Charlotte a conversational lifeboat, purely to protect her own flawless reputation from the ensuing collateral damage. Reminding the foolish girl that they are in a highly public setting, Rebecca warns that continuing this tantrum will not uncover any actual truth here. Offering her final grace, she firmly demands that Charlotte take back every single slanderous word and issue a formal apology. Slamming her hands down, Charlotte furiously rejects the offer, screaming that Rebecca is the only one who needs to apologize, though forgiveness is utterly impossible. Escalating her deranged fantasy, she wildly declares that Rebecca will have her noble title stripped, suffer monastery banishment, and be permanently exiled. Squealing with delusional joy, Charlotte boldly announces that His Highness Prince Garrett is going to romantically propose to her, self-titling herself as the Great Saintess Charlotte Silva. The ballroom erupts into chaotic clattering and frantic chatter as the sheer absurdity of the girl's claims washes over the stunned nobility. Maintaining a strained, frozen smile, Rebecca admits internally that she doesn't even know where to begin dismantling this spectacular mess. Staring down at the clinging girl, Rebecca coldly points out the most glaring legal flaw first. A mere baroness possesses absolutely no authority to order the stripping of a high-ranking noble's title. Discarding the absurd proposal claim entirely, Rebecca elegantly targets the saintess title, politely reminding the whispering crowd that an official awakening is strictly required. First, she mercilessly concludes that since Charlotte is merely an unawakened candidate, parading around as the actual saintess constitutes blatant employment fraud. Analyzing Charlotte's frantic wording, Rebecca astutely deduces that His Highness has not actually made any concrete future promises to the girl, proving he still retains a shred of sincerity toward his official engagement. Surprisingly, this pathetic realization actually makes Rebecca's overall evaluation of Prince Garrett marginally better. Looking at the intensely awkward silence engulfing the prince and his aides, Rebecca wryly notes that it is highly doubtful Garrett will ever propose after this humiliating public spectacle. With the groundwork perfectly laid and the crowd watching her every move, Rebecca decides it is finally time to raise the signal to aggressively retaliate. She initiates her master plan, determined to systematically destroy Charlotte's claims and successfully break off her own tedious engagement. Rebecca coldly declares that she generously gave Miss Charlotte sufficient chances to rectify her abhorrent behavior, concluding that the girl must suffer from a severe mental illness. She expresses profound aristocratic disgust that a supposedly educated noblewoman would willingly defame herself in such a disgraceful manner. Bowing with absolute, textbook perfection, Rebecca gracefully apologizes to His Majesty the King and all the distinguished guests gathered in the hall. She publicly expresses deep regret that such a vulgar, dramatic event was allowed to taint a public occasion like their graduation party. Rebecca acknowledges the strict social rule that involved parties should quietly leave the floor to resolve issues privately, demonstrating her superior grasp of etiquette. However, because she has been one-sidedly and falsely charged with severe crimes, she firmly states that she is in a definitive position where she must publicly retaliate. Charlotte lets out a dumbfounded gasp as Rebecca systematically traps her, pointing out that since the defamatory words have not been retracted, nor an apology issued, she must act. Addressing the king directly, the Moon Princess formally requests official leave to thoroughly prove her absolute innocence right here on the ballroom floor. A commanding, authoritative voice echoes from the royal dais as the king solemnly grants her formal permission to proceed. Offering a deep, respectful bow of gratitude, Rebecca turns her razor-sharp focus back to her enemies, ready to begin her devastating retaliation. Shrouded in the elegant, dark aura of a blooming rose, Rebecca embraces the cruel role that has been violently thrust upon her. She silently vows to deliver a truly flawless, utterly terrifying performance, acting exactly as a proper villainess should. Addressing the crowd with ringing clarity, Rebecca systematically begins dismantling the specific bullying allegations Lady Silva so recklessly threw around. She plainly states that her supposed cruelty consisted solely of pointing out basic, common-sense etiquette that every single noble is strictly expected to know. Staring sharply ahead, she details how Charlotte rudely initiated unapproved conversations with higher-ranking individuals, brazenly demanding to dance with the same man. Rebecca reminds the hall that dancing multiple times is an intimate act strictly excused only when the couple shares a firmly promised future together. Furthermore, she exposes how the girl constantly and unnecessarily clings to men who are already formally bound to other fiancés. To make matters worse, Charlotte loudly converses about deeply inappropriate subjects that are completely unsuitable for polite, high-society gatherings. Locking eyes with her stunned accuser, Rebecca asks if she is wrong, clarifying that being friendly is only acceptable when explicitly permitted by those of higher rank. Gesturing to the distressed noblewomen in the crowd, she demands Charlotte consider the agonizing feelings of ladies forced to watch another woman brazenly cling to their fiancés. She passionately argues that respecting these emotional boundaries is a basic standard of decency that anyone should naturally consider as a human being. Driven into a corner by flawless logic, Charlotte hysterically doubles down, screaming that the bullying is an absolute, undeniable fact. She childishly insists that any action immediately becomes bullying the exact moment the recipient subjectively feels that it is so. Unmoved by the emotional outburst, Rebecca coldly informs Lady Silva that she only voiced these corrections because the girl was appallingly ignorant of common knowledge. Pinching the bridge of his nose, an older noble releases an exhausted sigh as the relentless, public deconstruction of the girl's character continues, pivoting flawlessly to her next target. Rebecca announces she will now address the highly suspicious matter of Miss Charlotte's supposedly stolen personal belongings. Rebecca sharply asks how many times Charlotte shamelessly complained to Prince Garrett about her precious items being maliciously damaged or stolen. She then drops a devastating bombshell, noting how profoundly disappointed His Highness will be when he discovers Charlotte actually sold all of those items herself. Sweating profusely, Prince Garrett chokes on a gasp and demands to know exactly what his supposedly victimized fiancée means by the word, sold. Grabbing her dress in sheer, wide-eyed panic, Charlotte wildly accuses Rebecca of spouting utter nonsense, screaming to know on what basis these lies are built. Staring down with supreme confidence, Rebecca reminds everyone that as the official fiancée of the Lendor Kingdom's prince, she is deeply mindful of his surroundings. Furthermore, since her own movements are constantly monitored by elite royal guards, she is absolutely certain their logs will easily prove her innocence. To completely seal the trap, Rebecca reveals she proactively ordered her maid Amber and members of the covert Kage group to secretly buy back the exact items Charlotte had fenced. Thrashing against the mounting evidence, Charlotte desperately argues that physical proof proves nothing, screaming that everyone is lying because Lady Rebecca viciously threatened them. Sir Evan mutters a disgusted, "Wow," at the sheer patheticness of her flailing defense. Moving seamlessly to the ruined dress, Rebecca expresses extreme puzzle over Charlotte's unusual tastes. Noting the girl horribly altered the garment herself, she points out the horrific, fully exposed back cut, stating no unmarried lady would ever dare attend a formal party in such a shameless, scandalous dress. With shocking honesty, Rebecca openly admits to intentionally spilling a drink on Charlotte's dress right before she entered the grand hall. However, she sharply reminds the furious girl that if she had attended the royal party in that half-naked state, the only one suffering catastrophic embarrassment would have been Charlotte herself. Suddenly, a horrified noblewoman steps forward, loudly confessing that she was the one who frantically consulted Lady Howard about the scandalously altered dress. Smiling with icy satisfaction, Rebecca tells Charlotte that she should be thanking her for the rescue, as there is absolutely no basis to blame her. Multiple girls immediately chime in to support the truth, testifying that they could not believe their own eyes upon seeing the dress near Lady Silva's dormitory. Unable to make a judgment, they fetched dormitory head Lady Howard to handle the crisis, and were physically present when the drink was strategically spilled. As the ballroom erupts into validating murmurs, Rebecca graciously thanks Lady Sophie and Lady Samantha for their ironclad, public testimonies. Rebecca is internally astounded that Charlotte stubbornly refuses to simply surrender and apologize even while being brutally cornered. Defiantly flapping her arms, Charlotte lies that she never intended to go with her back exposed, completely ignoring the attendant's testimony of her joyfully cutting the dress with scissors while humming. Shocked that her own maid betrayed her, Charlotte screams that attendants shouldn't be allowed to give formal testimonies, proving she entirely ignores the social world's actual ranking systems. Rebecca calmly retorts that even though Millie is a lowly attendant, she possesses a human heart and a functioning moral compass of her own. Moving to deliver the final, crushing blow, Rebecca brings up the infamous thug incident. She dryly points out that if a student sneaks out of the girls' dormitory to wander in the dead of night, it is glaringly obvious they will be apprehended by the patrolling guards. Recalling the absurd memory of seeing Charlotte violently dragged back to her room by the palace security force, Rebecca dramatically emphasizes the profound shock she felt at witnessing such a sight. As the crowd murmurs in genuine pity over what a pitifully stupid person this so-called saintess candidate truly is, Rebecca feigns elegant innocence. She calmly explains she actually sent her handmaiden in a frantic hurry to stop the guards to carefully prevent the matter from going public, completely unaware that Charlotte's paranoid delusion had twisted this rescue into an orchestrated thug attack. Overlooking the lush gardens, a solemn man admits his failure to guide his juniors onto the right path, specifically apologizing to his sister as the dormitory head for his inability to maintain order. He contemplates the perceptive graduates who foresaw this chaotic day, particularly noting the involvement of Prince Garrett in the unfolding drama. Staring with an intensely serious expression, the elegant Lady Rebecca points out that he did not deny the claims regarding the sudden breaking off of their engagement. Kneeling with profound grace, the beautiful Charlotte faithfully accepts the abrupt annulment of the engagement. A detailed glimpse of a delicate rose resting upon an elaborate dress highlights the prestigious territory skillfully managed by her esteemed father. The surrounding crowd erupts into a flurry of bewildered chatter, thoroughly shocked by the unprecedented spectacle unfolding before them. Whispering furiously among themselves, the onlookers agree by a close margin that it is a grave sin to defame a noble princess candidate for such a petty reason. Clutching her chest nervously, a young woman laments how incredibly difficult it is to oppose a high-ranking noble who is destined to take responsibility. Amidst the continuous chatter, a bystander sincerely wishes all the best to any capable people willing to step up and raise Charlotte to become the future princess. A young man internally celebrates this as the best outcome, relieved that he safely annulled his engagement without bringing harm to his family name while significantly lightening Prince Garrett's lingering guilt. Speaking in confidence with Rebecca, a sophisticated nobleman reveals he has already provided their father with evidence against the false charges to force a break in the engagement, expressly wanting to avoid deep relations with the royal family. As a profoundly confused Charlotte questions the situation, the aristocratic elders sternly decide to end the ball immediately to prepare a proper place to discuss the matter and confirm the absolute truth. Handing down an absolute royal order, the elders fiercely decree that no one is to spread a single word regarding this delicate matter until the complete truth has been uncovered. Bowing in swift, synchronized reverence, the loyal subjects loudly pledge to abide entirely by the royal will. Plunged into an absolute nightmare, the second prince agonizes over the sheer humiliation of being publicly rejected by his own fiancée during his grand graduation debut. Gripping his face in utter despair, he laments that Lady Charlotte was simply supposed to transfer smoothly to the temple, as there was never any intention to prematurely break off the engagement. Chuckling nervously, he dreads the impending wrath of his family, terrifyingly aware that his older brother might actually kill him and his mother will ruthlessly chew him out despite his majesty's brief reprieve. Suddenly noticing Marquis Howard looming among the judging elders, Garrett physically recoils from their intense, scrutinizing glares. An imposing figure points aggressively at Garrett, firmly placing the entire blame upon him while an annoyed Charlotte fiercely pouts in the background. Recognizing his deep inconsideration regarding Charlotte's manipulative personality, Garrett urgently asks his friends Ethan, David, and Silva to escort the precious saintess candidate safely back to the dormitory. Standing resolutely before the remaining crowd, he hopes no one misunderstands the situation, firmly declaring that marrying Charlotte instead of Rebecca is absolutely out of the question because no love exists between them. A haunting memory echoes through his mind, recalling a bold promise insisting that he would inevitably fall in love with her. Turning with ethereal grace under the radiant lights, Lady Rebecca confidently asserts that she has spent the last 3 years turning those ambitious words into reality. Utterly desperate to keep rival men away from her, Garrett fiercely resolves that he cannot let Rebecca go, willing to bind her with an engagement contract just to ensure the royal family's ironclad protection. With a determined and unwavering gaze, the young prince solidifies his ultimate vow to never let Rebecca slip away. Sighing heavily over his predicament, he frustratedly wonders what excuse he can possibly use when there is nothing left to explain, deeply regretting that he did not refuse outright from the beginning. He reflects silently on a secret pact forged 3 years ago with his older brother Ethan, a confidential agreement he deliberately kept hidden from both Rebecca and their mother. Right as he was preparing to enroll at Lemres, the young prince was utterly stunned to discover he was to be engaged to Lady Rebecca, bitterly accepting that royalty has never possessed the freedom to choose whom they marry. Sitting formally in the dimly lit dining hall, a younger Garrett quietly processes the immense weight of this life-altering announcement. His older brother, the esteemed crown prince, had only just successfully finalized his own prestigious engagement to the beautiful princess of the neighboring Siam kingdom. To prevent any unsavory suitors from sniffing around, the royal family unanimously agreed to swiftly welcome Lady Rebecca into their ranks as Garrett's official betrothed. The court elders gasp in continuous awe, completely mesmerized because Lady Rebecca's sharp cleverness and radiant beauty miraculously exceeded even the most exaggerated rumors. Having thought her perfection was a mere rumor until speaking with her today, they note her sheer brilliance in finally showing her face at Ethan's bustling engagement party. Gossiping quietly, the nobles observe that Lady Rebecca's parents are certainly eccentric, deliberately avoiding the normal tradition of visiting the palace to curry favor for their daughter. The queen casually wonders how one might persuade that stubbornly protective marquis to agree, surmising he only brought his prized daughter forward because the chance to become the crown prince's consort had safely passed. It is widely known that Marquis Howard selfishly hid his wonderful daughter from the court, frequently complaining that if she married into the royal family, he would barely get to see her. Questioning his father about Marquis Howard's strange avoidance of royalty, Garrett learns that despite their deeply loyal history and passionate royal romances, the current head possesses zero interest in grueling power struggles. Beaming with a clever solution, the elegant queen volunteers to immediately send a persuasive letter to Rebecca's mother, knowing her close friend can easily bypass the fiercely doting father. The king expresses profound admiration for the 14-year-old girl who has steadily built incredible diplomatic skill and vital connections, noting that the Marquis frequently takes her to various countries instead of his son David. Quietly sipping from his glass, a young Garrett silently digests the overwhelming praise continually showered upon his newly appointed fiancée. Having just secured Ethan's engagement to the Princess of Siam, the king muses that they must carefully observe how Garrett grows to see if he is truly well-matched for such a splendid lady like Rebecca. While the queen joyfully finishes her wine in celebration, Garrett stares blankly ahead, entirely intimidated by the monumental expectations instantly placed upon his youthful shoulders. Bristling with a sudden flare of princely pride, Garrett complains about being looked down upon, bitterly wondering if this grand engagement is merely a forced compromise for the brilliant and beautiful girl. Attempting to mask his inner turmoil, Garrett quickly dismisses his older brother's gentle concern on the very day this infamous incident occurred. Accepting his inescapable duty, he formally acknowledges his engagement to Rebecca Howard, the remarkably gifted 14-year-old eldest daughter of House Howard. 17-year-old Ethan, the first prince of the Landel Kingdom, warmly congratulates his younger brother and eagerly asks to be introduced to his future sister-in-law. Ethan playfully warns Garrett, the highly praised model of the royal family in academics and spellcraft, not to lose his nerve over the exceptionally talented Lady Rebecca or her notoriously overprotective father. Pausing to cast a serious glance over his shoulder, Ethan firmly advises his little brother that if he genuinely wishes to find a true partner, he must actively search for one himself. Staring back in absolute bewilderment, Garrett loudly questions what that cryptic advice is supposed to mean, wondering if his honorable brother is actually suggesting he find a mistress. Pondering whether his older brother has already found his true companion, Garrett admits he simply doesn't know, yet he realizes he might actually fall in love if a woman he truly wants to protect ever appears. Approaching his older brother at the crowded desk, Garrett earnestly requests to arrange a proper meeting completely alone with Lady Rebecca, observing aloud that his brother doesn't seem genuinely interested in her at all. Stepping forward with absolute aristocratic grace, the young girl introduces herself as Rebecca of House Howard, formally expressing her profound honor at meeting Prince Ethan. Utterly stunned by the sudden and unexpected introduction, Garrett shoots a deeply bewildered glance at his older brother. The young daughter of House Howard smiles radiantly, her bright, captivating eyes demanding the immediate attention of the royal siblings. Stepping directly into the spotlight, Prince Ethan confidently extends his hand toward the young noblewoman with a charming, intensely focused gaze. Leaning in with an air of absolute romantic certainty, Ethan boldly declares that the young lady is inevitably going to fall for him. Standing completely frozen in the background, a wide-eyed Garrett stares in sheer disbelief at his older brother's shockingly brazen romantic advance. Maintaining her perfect, unbreakable composure, Rebecca skillfully diffuses the heavy tension by playfully reminding the prince that she is simply one of the many ordinary citizens who deeply adore the royal family. Caught entirely off guard by her clever and flawless deflection, the confident prince pauses as his intense expression rapidly shifts into genuine surprise. Watching this unprecedented, fiery exchange unfold, Garrett firmly decides that successfully fulfilling his older brother's romantic vow will immediately become his absolute top priority. Hunched diligently over his cluttered academic desk, Garrett pens a heartfelt letter to his dear older brother, proudly reporting that things have been going exceptionally well with Lady Rebecca since their official engagement. Despite fully acknowledging their strict bond as a mere political arrangement, he openly admits that her earnest gaze and highly courteous manner have successfully cultivated a deep sibling-like affection and a profound comrade's trust. Sealing the private letter with a deeply determined smile, Garrett privately vows to grow strong enough to finally accomplish something meaningful for his beloved brother's sake. Reflecting on their cherished shared past, Garrett fondly remembers how his brilliant and remarkably charismatic older brother was always his greatest pride, personally teaching him the vital ways of the sword. Thinking back on his rigorous, exhausting training in swordsmanship, riding, and academics, Garrett realizes he must have been a terribly annoying little brother, yet Ethan always indulged his relentless selfishness and doted on him without a single look of displeasure. Shifting his intense focus to their massive secret agenda, Garrett reveals that he and his older brother began quiet, meticulous preparations to end the engagement in a few years, fiercely resolving that they must never let Rebecca slip away. Gripping his heartfelt letter with a sudden, crushing wave of doubt, the young prince anxiously wonders if constantly playing the supportive role will prevent him from ever finding a true, loving partner of his own. Excitement undeniably stirs within his hopeful heart as he recalls receiving highly private orders to monitor the saintess awakening of Lady Charlotte Silva, the radiant and wildly unpredictable candidate who suddenly appeared before him. Bursting with highly infectious, uncontainable energy, the cheerful girl introduces herself as Charlotte Silva and immediately begs the stunned royal prince to casually call her by her first name. Thoroughly caught off guard by her incredibly cheerful and blinding smile during their very first meeting, Garrett finds himself utterly captivated by the undeniably lovely young woman. Standing extremely nervously beside a perfectly stoic Lady Rebecca, an awestruck Garrett officially recognizes the cheerful newcomer as the highly famed saintess candidate. Stepping forward with absolute, terrifying aristocratic poise, an unbothered Rebecca formally greets the brightly smiling Charlotte with a chillingly calm demeanor. Establishing her absolute, undeniable dominance, the elegant noblewoman introduces herself as Rebecca Howard, explicitly declaring her untouchable status as the eldest daughter of House Howard and Prince Garrett's official fiancée. Staring down with an icy, flawlessly calculating gaze, Rebecca sharply warns the naive girl that, for the sake of her own fragile reputation, she must patiently wait for His Highness to address her first. While Garrett helplessly watches the increasingly tense exchange with mild confusion, a fierce and highly defiant pout immediately breaks across Charlotte's previously cheerful, innocent face. Realizing that casually initiating conversation with a higher rank violently breaks basic etiquette, Garrett privately wonders if her heavily sheltered status as a saintess candidate is precisely why she lacks such common sense, ironically noting that some might actually find her wildly defined expression cute. He seriously recalls that saintess candidates are incredibly rare women possessing holy light magic, and that they must urgently undergo a crucial awakening to permanently root their sacred power and formally claim their divine title. Sitting highly attentively in a grand lecture hall, Garrett listens to a strict professor explain that awakening does not miraculously guarantee success, aggressively warning that a candidate's holy power can terrifyingly invert and utterly consume them with pure evil. Learning that a horribly corrupted saintess brings catastrophic calamity while a pure one brings immense national benefit, Garrett laughs nervously, completely understanding why these highly volatile candidates must be handled with the absolute utmost care. Carefully observing Charlotte's highly dramatic and unpolished reactions, Rebecca accurately deduces that the church deliberately kept her entirely sheltered and pure-hearted, though she coldly dismisses the hyperactive girl as completely childish. Unlike past, deeply isolated candidates who strictly resided at the temple regardless of their societal status, Garrett realizes that Charlotte must have uniquely grown up at home, blissfully unburdened by worldly corruption or rigid, exhausting etiquette. Strolling confidently through the magnificent academy gates, the royal trio openly acknowledges that Lady Charlotte's highly anticipated arrival marks the very first time Lemra's Academy has ever welcomed an official Saintess candidate. This unprecedented, shocking freedom stems from recently published research confirming that a candidate's awakening depends entirely on her innate qualities rather than her environment, completely justifying her highly unusual life outside the rigid temple walls. Glancing highly suspiciously at the massive academic buildings, Garrett internally questions the incredibly convenient timing, deeply wondering why highly public dormitory life at Lemra's Academy was specifically chosen for her right now. Reflecting on countless historical precedents where powerful royals frequently took saintesses as wives, he cleverly notes that actual sacred magic is the only true requirement, entirely dismissing the mythological need for absolute virginity. Connecting the highly sinister political dots, he quickly realizes this forced academy enrollment is clearly immense pressure from the greedy court, desperately hoping Charlotte might officially become his royal consort if her awakening magically succeeds. Despite the boundless, overwhelming prosperity a saintess could potentially bring, Garrett firmly anchors himself to his absolute secret promise with his elder brother, heavily stressing that the kingdom of Render strictly enforces absolute monogamy. Narrowing his eyes in extremely deep, paranoid thought, he heavily struggles to determine if this overwhelming political pressure stems from genuine national concern, or if it is a highly roundabout scheme to viciously steal Lady Rebecca away for another noble's opportunistic son. Watching the profoundly naive Charlotte remain dangerously isolated in ruthless aristocratic society, he refuses to just stand by, aggressively swearing to bravely protect her even though he has absolutely no intention of ever making her his permanent consort. As Charlotte wildly and playfully drapes herself over his shoulders during a highly tense chess match, Garrett passionately justifies his controversial involvement by declaring it his absolute gentlemanly duty to heroically protect a desperately vulnerable woman. The surrounding young ladies uniformly grimace in sheer disgust at Charlotte's wildly improper fawning, prompting a furious Rebecca to loudly and publicly scold the saintess candidate for casually touching an engaged man's body. Glaring with highly piercing, murderous intensity, Rebecca mercilessly reminds the overly familiar girl that casually addressing members of high station in such a profoundly disrespectful manner is exceedingly ill-mannered. Completely ignoring the invaluable, highly practical aristocratic advice, Charlotte violently flips the social script by smugly challenging Rebecca to read the school rules, triumphantly quoting that all students are completely equal within the protective academy walls. Poking the intensely furious noblewoman without a single ounce of rational fear, Charlotte wildly weaponizes the academy rules against her, aggressively lecturing Rebecca that the equality mandate was explicitly created to forcibly prevent high-ranking elites from abusing their lesser peers. Screaming the very word equality with completely unhinged, highly mocking delight, the chaotic saintess candidate viciously demands to know if the brilliant noblewoman's head is simply too thick to comprehend basic, undeniable concepts. Desperate to immediately de-escalate the rapidly exploding, highly dangerous situation, Garrett hastily and physically places himself between the two fiercely warring women with a deeply strained, incredibly nervous smile. When a deeply frustrated Rebecca strictly orders him to stay completely out of the messy conflict, Garrett weakly defends his incredibly foolish intervention by frantically citing his undeniable upperclassman responsibility to guide his wayward juniors. Reluctantly backing down from her intensely terrifying glare, Garrett meekly apologizes for the deeply unpleasant ordeal as Rebecca coldly announces that she will handle the strict disciplinary measures entirely from here. Pinching her brow in sheer, unadulterated exasperation, Rebecca sharply points out that Charlotte's overly friendly familiarity with men is actively igniting constant, highly destructive friction between engaged couples and established lovers across the entire campus. Flashing a shockingly beautiful and wildly terrifying confident smile, the incredibly fierce daughter of House Howard ultimately declares that she genuinely doesn't mind the chaotic challenge of brutally taming the unruly girl at all. A white-haired man smiles warmly, expressing his deep gratitude for her unwavering trust. He playfully suggests, however, that she could afford to be a little bit jealous. His bright demeanor suddenly shifts, leaving only a serious, contemplative gaze as he hesitates. Standing behind his blonde fiancée, he clarifies that he is asking this as her comrade-in-arms, wondering if that position will suffice. Voices call out for Lord Garrett, warning that personal resentment against Miss Charlotte could devolve into troublesome prejudice against the saintess candidate. They urgently request the student council to take her under its wing to minimize the damage before the wound deepens. A tearful blonde girl bursts onto the scene crying for Lord Garrett, completely convinced that Lady Rebecca is responsible for her belongings getting broken and going missing. Spectators sigh at the oddball's dramatic complaints about her ruined dress, while Garrett promptly excuses himself with a snap to handle student council work in the other room. Two students complain about Charlotte's overwhelmingly intense physical contact, with one lamenting that despite her arranged engagement, being misunderstood with her makes his stomach hurt right after winning Sophie over. A dark-haired boy scowls fiercely, finding it highly unpleasant to be forced to look after a dim-witted girl who blatantly ignores his older sister's advice. The boys bicker at a table, with David being warned to watch his harsh tongue even though he insists he isn't foolish enough to insult her to her face. Charlotte blissfully hugs the prince to thank him for a new dress, while the teachers decide her negative influence requires punishment, demanding everyone bear with her until graduation. Charlotte sulks with a cup of tea, utterly disgusted that a so-called villainess would disgracefully resist at the graduation party like a sore loser before transitioning to the temple. Little Charlotte glares resentfully at the elegant, smirking Rebecca, furious about being kicked out of the party venue just as her rival seemingly planned. Sipping tea, she laments that Lord Brandon ruined the glorious condemnation event where she intended to accuse the villainess of slandering the heroine, though she hopes the game's corrections will fix it. Staring absent-mindedly while eating, she nonchalantly complains that being such a popular woman is a heavy burden. She vividly recalls the prince's lackluster gaze back then, noting his eyes looked exactly like those of a dead fish. During the intense denouncement event, Brandon had subtly pulled her close and held her tightly against him. She smugly assumes the sight left His Highness Garrett completely stunned with jealousy, an outcome that thoroughly satisfied her massive ego. Annoyed by Brandon's extreme possessiveness and refusal to hand her over, she demands he dial it back, warning him that interfering in romances results in getting kicked to death by a horse. Glancing at the sullen, brown-haired man who brought her here, she realizes his strange resemblance to Rebecca is seriously getting under her skin. She panics dramatically, demanding to know why her absolute humiliation turned out this way, refusing to accept it even if the game's narrative corrects itself later. Desperate voices plead for her, praising Charlotte's pure heart and declaring her a true saintess filled with love while urging her to leave before charges are pressed. Tiny Charlotte violently kicks open a set of double doors, screaming in utter frustration to ask if this is how otome games are really supposed to be. The sullen brown-haired man and another gentleman stare in bewilderment, wondering if an otome game is just some sort of children's make-believe. She gleefully admires her flawless white skin, her cherry-red lips, her aquamarine eyes, and her loosely waving pink blonde hair. Smiling with supreme confidence, she declares that no matter how many times she checks, she is undeniably cute, a massive upgrade from her previous life. She fondly remembers a time when she was loved simply for existing, whether safe at home or studying at the Royal Lemras Academy. Staring deeply at an ornate floral emblem, she reassures herself that she was absolutely certain of that affection. Holding a gorgeous bouquet of roses, she concludes with a smile that human happiness is directly proportional to one's physical looks. A sprawling map highlights the Silva barony, the precise location at the southern edge of the Render Kingdom where Charlotte Silva was born. She recounts the history of her loving parents, noting that their strong bond was tested by her mother's frailty and struggle to conceive. Because of this difficult journey, her parents were overjoyed at her birth and spoiled her terribly, which made perfect sense since this world existed for her to restart her life. She realized this was a cliché otome game ice guy at age 13 when she tripped while picking berries, a harsh fall that triggered memories of her ugly past life. Waking up in bed surrounded by worried faces, she excitedly realizes she is the heroine and anticipates a guaranteed romance sweep. She revels in the clear-cut template of a mere baron's daughter utterly crushing a higher-ranked villainess to triumphantly become the crown princess. Shocked and devastated, she questions why she feels like the one who got absolutely demolished instead of easily securing the prince's affection. Frowning over her teacup, she admits she has no idea what to do, suddenly terrified that this simple otome game might actually have a bad ending. She confesses she never actually played the game when it finally arrived because she fiercely resented her older sister, who was the one truly obsessed with it. In her original life, she was merely the second daughter of an ordinary, middle-class Japanese family of 4. Unfortunately inheriting her parents' unremarkable bloodlines, her face was considered unfortunate by modern Japanese standards, making her undeniably ugly. Conversely, her older sister bypassed their parents' looks to inherit their grandmother's well-proportioned features, all while weirdly enjoying academics. Because her sister was 2 years older and academically brilliant, every single thing she did was unfairly compared to her beautiful sibling. She found no solace anywhere, as neither her relatives nor her neighbors ever appreciated her, always praising her sister's achievements instead. Even her teachers fueled the resentment, cheerfully encouraging her to work hard so she might one day match her older sister's brilliance. She bitterly chewed on the fact that she only received safe, boring clothes meant to suit both of them, forced to endure passive-aggressive jealousy over her sister's hand-me-downs. Her mother entirely dismissed her complaints about the clothes, harshly telling her to fix her hair and eyebrows before criticizing her sister's generous care. Sitting sullenly in her glasses, she fell into deep despair, convinced that no matter how hard she tried, her dad's ugly features would never change. She completely rejected the optimistic lie that everyone has good points, firmly believing instead that the entire world runs on looks alone. Staring resentfully at an interview in a thorough strategy guide magazine, she wondered why her sister, who had a perfect life, was so obsessed with a girl's game like this. She admits that remembering her past life brings immense pain, as she lived with absolutely nothing and lacked even a shred of luck. Her final memory is the cruelest of all, revealing that her very first date with a high school classmate was nothing more than a humiliating punishment game prank. Crying on her way home, she tragically got caught in an accident and died. Recalling the game's package art featuring a girl with pink gold hair named Charlotte Silva, she became absolutely certain of her new reality. She smugly concluded that God granted her a cheat-filled happy life to compensate for her terrible previous existence. Just before regaining her past memories, she discovered she possessed light attribute magical power, which perfectly aligned with the world settings for magic and saintesses. Although she didn't feel like studying, she had no choice when her weeping parents warned that failing to control her power would put her life in danger. Doting completely on their daughter, her parents agreed to spoil Charlotte to their heart's content until they inevitably had to be separated. Because her revered light magic made her a saintess candidate until her power fully awakened, it was decided she would be entrusted to the temple upon turning 15. She grimly remembered having an unfortunate metabolism in her past life that caused her to gain more weight than she actually ate. Realizing the kingdom's policy change to accept saintess candidates at the Royal Lemres Academy, she confidently anticipated a solo victory reverse harem life, even though she ignored her sister's fangirl ramblings and forgot the actual capture targets. Ignoring her parents' wishes to keep her at a nearby temple, she relied entirely on game logic, assuming the undeniably handsome second prince would naturally take an interest in her. Smiling brightly, she decided to aim straight for the prince, utterly convinced that the world itself would automatically lay down the rails to her happiness even if she did nothing. Panicking slightly at the thought of missing out, she declared that not attending the academy would ruin her destiny to meet the second prince and become his princess consort. Claiming she used sacred magic to foresee the future, she manipulated her parents into scraping together the money to enroll her at Lemres Academy at age 15. She gleefully envisioned a wonderful academy life filled with delicious food, beautiful dresses, and people fawning all over her. Believing this world existed solely for her happiness, she planned to act however she wanted while making adorable requests. Rejecting the burdensome manners and responsibilities of becoming crown princess, she calculated that targeting the realistic second prince would allow her to live freely and comfortably. Supremely arrogant, she boldly declared herself the protagonist of the world, planning to simply push the prince's fiancé aside. To make herself look even better, she specifically hired a plain-faced maid named Maria Millie to serve as a foil while she began conquering the game at the academy. Sneering pitifully at girls who relied only on their rank, she lazily refused to study socializing or academics, assuming her doting future husband and eventual promotion to saintess would protect her. Unbothered by her lack of friends, she thrilled at playing the tragically beautiful victim, blaming all her problems on the villainous Rebecca Howard while simply smiling and playing dumb. Ignoring lectures about improperly using a higher-ranked lady's first name, she falsely accused the petty villainess of wicked bullying, like deliberately throwing juice on her dresses. Framing her outcast status and harassment as a necessary rite of passage, she happily noted that the bullying successfully pushed her closer to Prince Garrett and the student council. A maid agreed with her delusional logic that being confined to a room was actually for her protection, leading her to wonder if Garrett left early to process his annulment. She rationalized her retreat by noting that exposing Rebecca's lies in a room flowing with the villainess's favor would have been incredibly uncomfortable. Despite the situation deviating heavily from the dramatic condemnation event she had envisioned, she calmly reassured herself that the engagement would still be broken off. Laughing maniacally, she swore that the world would bless her and eventually crush Rebecca under accumulated humiliation, provided she carefully monitored the game's event flags. Stepping forward with a sudden request, a young man apologized for his lack of consideration and surprisingly asked Rebecca if she would go along with a fake marriage for now. A tense silence immediately followed the unexpected proposal, leaving the onlookers to silently process the sudden shift in the relational dynamics. The atmospheric pause lingered deeply in the room, quietly emphasizing the gravity of the newly proposed arrangement before moving forward. About half a month after graduation, a letter from her former fiancé Garrett arrived at the townhouse she had swiftly relocated to from the academy dormitory. Holding a watering can, a sharply dressed man criticized Garrett for being utterly pathetic, wishing the prince had properly protected his beloved daughter instead of standing dazed at the condemnation party. Gathering around the tea table, the group openly questioned why the engagement hadn't been officially broken off yet, finding the delay exceptionally weird. The blonde maid calmly deduced that the delay was likely because Miss Charlotte simply did not meet the rigorous standards required of a new royal fiancé. Hearing that Prince Garrett was under immense pressure from the king and queen to buy time for Charlotte's re-education, she sternly refused to cooperate if it meant prolonging her own engagement. She reflected that her past self would have blindly accepted Garrett's selfish request, foolishly feeling as though she were supporting a dear brother's romance. Clenching her chest, she admitted she felt bad for the prince, but with her past life's husband still in her heart, she couldn't stomach the charade of promising anyone else a future. Smiling with quiet resolve, her father declared he was eager to break off the engagement himself, instructing Rebecca to ignore the letter completely while he wrote the reply. Wondering what to do with her leisurely day off, she remembered how she used to hold back from writing, terrified of the disaster that falling from a horse would bring. The scene transitioned quietly to the outdoors, offering a brief moment of visual respite as they moved toward the riding grounds. A silent exchange of glances between companions subtly shifted the mood, building a quiet anticipation for the upcoming maneuvers. The quiet observation continued unabated, silently underscoring the subtle complexities of their evolving and calculated alliances. The lingering silence set a contemplative tone across the grounds, hinting at the strategic moves yet to be completely revealed. Luxuriating in a massive bath, Rebecca happily ordered the maid to strip the petals from Garrett's daily floral deliveries to make her bath time wonderfully fragrant. Noticing the entire staff gathered around, she learned they were mass-plucking the prince's pitiful flowers just to prevent the estate from being completely buried in them. The stern butler interrupted the banter to report a suspicious figure lurking around the vicinity, prompting the young boy to ask if Miss Charlotte was scheming again. Soaking calmly in the tub, Rebecca listened as the maid revealed that Charlotte had actively been spreading violent rumors about beating the villainess to a pulp. Pausing her bath time relaxation, Rebecca offered a serene smile and simply noted the newly delivered information with chilling amusement. Realizing her free movement was restricted until the engagement formally dissolved, she admitted that vacating the townhouse and doing whatever she pleased had grown tiresome anyway. Acknowledging her weakness in attack magic, she pondered how to protect herself from impending threats and called out to Emma for a solution. Emma, secretly a member of the intelligence network known as Peridot, expertly advised her lady to learn how to handle poisons for self-defense. Emma readily agrees to her lady's request, utilizing her deeply rooted, extensive knowledge of complex pharmaceuticals to aid her. Pondering their highly precarious political situation, the desperate lady intensely contemplates forging a specialized self-defense tool expressly designed to buy precious seconds for a swift escape whenever a sudden, lethal attack might inevitably occur. Shockingly, as an incidental yet intensely horrific display of her absolute dedication, the resolute maid Emma relentlessly and ruthlessly tests the highly dangerous poisons she personally synthesizes upon her very own body. Sweating profusely but grinning with a visibly manic thrill, Emma eagerly brushes off an offer of restorative healing magic by breathlessly declaring she is still far from reaching her physical limits. Offering a chilling choice between a colorless or a blue lethal concoction, Emma enthusiastically maintains a rigorous regimen that began when Lady Rebecca turned 13, administering mild toxins to build essential noble resistance to assassination attempts despite natural protests against self-poisoning. Readily accepting Lady Rebecca's decisive choice with an unsettling calmness, the highly obedient maid confirms the immediate selection of the blue poison with a polite, deferential bow of her head. House Howard's patriarch boisterously laughs while explaining that their direct bloodline traditionally ingests trace poisons under strict medical supervision to cultivate immunity, a multi-generational practice that hilariously once left him laughing uncontrollably for 3 straight days, wholly absolving Emma of any reckless endangerment. Startled by a sudden, incredibly casual motion, Rebecca lets out a confused gasp as Emma tips back the delicate teacup to nonchalantly sample the deadly, untested brew herself. Flushing with an intense, deeply unwavering devotion, Emma vehemently proclaims her highly dangerous actions are entirely for her beloved lady's sake, eagerly volunteering to be a living, breathing test subject for experimental healing magic if permitted. As Emma's stomach ominously gurgles from the ingested toxins, a highly flustered Rebecca desperately tries to remind her overzealous maid that only the noblewoman is supposed to be building resistance, yet Emma staunchly refuses to let anything potentially lethal pass her lady's lips without tasting it first. Recognizing the highly questionable sanity of constantly falling ill during every single break just to aggressively test pharmaceutical limits, Rebecca muses that Emma's astonishingly heavyweight devotion easily rivals even the most elite, hardened intelligence operatives known as the Shadows. Sighing deeply out of profound, suffocating boredom, the noble lady's stagnant mood is suddenly broken by Emma's cheerful, vibrant announcement that the potent new poison formulation is finally complete. Because she hails from a specialized branch of a physician family that historically tutors the Howards in complex toxicology, Emma was deliberately recruited as a lady-in-waiting for these highly lethal skills, mostly exempting her from standard, mundane household chores. Working diligently alongside bubbling, highly volatile chemistry apparatuses while properly masked, the two maids excitedly decide to add more chemical stimulation to the brew, prompting a desperate request for a pleasant fragrance to adequately mask the clinging, horribly toxic scent. Smiling with a shared, delightfully sinister understanding, the meticulously dressed maids silently revel in the dark, magnificent perfection of their freshly crafted, utterly lethal concoction. Gazing intensely upon an elegant, glittering array of intricately designed poison vials, they chillingly strategize the absolute best, most deceptive methods to force an unsuspecting enemy to unwittingly ingest the deadly fluids. Anticipating a ruthless, inevitable retaliation, aggressively strategizing against the deadly assassins that the antagonistic Miss Charlotte would likely dispatch soon morphed into a wonderfully enjoyable, intellectually stimulating pastime for both Rebecca and Emma. Basking in a rare, fleeting moment of smug, peaceful satisfaction, the young lady's thoughts drift outward toward the imposing, grandiose architecture of the Academy's sprawling estate resting under a vast, cloudy sky. Gathering formally in a sunlit, cavernous hall, an older nobleman and a stern-faced woman check on the well-being of a brightly smiling Miss Charlotte Silva, gently prompting her to reveal the urgent matter she so desperately wished to discuss. An incredibly tense, heavy silence descends as the severely furrowed brows and sweating faces of the anxious adults betray a deep, unspoken dread regarding the impending, momentous conversation. Shattering her cheerful, wildly optimistic illusion with surgical precision, the severe woman drops a devastating bombshell, flatly informing the wide-eyed Miss Charlotte that the administration formally requests she abandon her studies and leave Lemra's Academy immediately. Slamming her hands on the wooden table in bewildered desperation, Charlotte wildly misinterprets the expulsion as a miraculous early graduation to her second year, only to be heavily corrected by the despairing nobleman who insists she must transfer her education entirely to the isolated temple. Completely stunned and deeply disoriented by this sudden, inexplicable exile, the bewildered girl stares blankly upward, her voice trembling as she softly demands to know the underlying reason for such a drastic, life-altering decision. Rubbing his temples in sheer, unadulterated exasperation over her oblivious innocence regarding the disastrous graduation party, the weary nobleman firmly declares that her inability to recognize what she did wrong is absolute proof that Lemra's Academy is fundamentally incompatible with her ongoing presence. Seething with a rapidly resurfacing, uncontainable fury, Charlotte indignantly defends her hard work and decent grades, fiercely arguing that despite having bitter enemies at the Academy, she possesses a massive, highly loyal fanbase that proves her inherent, undeniable worth. Masterfully quelling Charlotte's furious, arrogant accusations of noble bias, the graceful woman expertly reframes the expulsion not as a punishment for a Saintess candidate, but as a prestigious, inescapable relocation to the highly esteemed Aliana Temple operating strictly under immense royal patronage. Instantly dazzled by the intoxicating, overwhelming allure of royal prestige, Charlotte enthusiastically clasps her hands together, her blinding anger dissolving as she excitedly marvels at attending the legendary Aliana temple meant exclusively for princesses harboring the divine qualities of a true saintess. Concluding their highly covert intelligence briefing in the opulent study, the gathered associates deduce that His Highness Garrett must have leveraged his deep royal family ties to quietly orchestrate the troublesome saintess candidate's permanent departure from the academy by next week. Looking up from her heavy, leather-bound tome with a chillingly serene, victorious smirk, Rebecca gracefully voices her intense, highly calculated satisfaction at the overwhelmingly wonderful news of her bitter rival's imminent exile. Observing her mistress's dark, triumphant expression, a beautifully deadpan maid silently judges the sheer, utter irony of such a vicious look coming from someone who had just spent her leisure time gleefully brewing deadly, highly illegal toxins. Despite harboring profound, exhausting exasperation toward the younger girl, Rebecca pragmatically acknowledges that she possesses no active desire to inflict sheer misery on Charlotte, recognizing that the girl's uniquely bizarre mindset makes it fundamentally impossible for her to ever assimilate peacefully at the academy after all the preceding dramatic incidents. Softening slightly with a twinge of genuine, albeit incredibly distant sympathy, Rebecca quietly admits she is genuinely glad the deeply isolated Charlotte finally found a specialized environment where she truly belongs instead of remaining utterly alone and despised among her peers. Watching the devoted temple clerics respectfully greet a visiting prince, the group seriously notes that to shield the fragile kingdom from total, unmitigated disaster, Charlotte's rigorous saintess education must proceed unconditionally to proactively prevent the catastrophic possibility of her falling entirely to absolute darkness. Stretching lazily in her ornate, highly cushioned armchair, Rebecca casually reiterates her fervent desire to dissolve her political engagement as rapidly as possible, noting with mild, begrudging respect that the timid yet thoroughly competent Prince Garrett completely understands and shares this strategic sentiment. Gazing resolutely out the grand, sunlit window, the refreshed lady decisively declares an end to her prolonged vacation, shifting her sharp, analytical focus back toward the monumental responsibility of meticulously managing the vast Howard family territory. With a gentle, highly nostalgic gleam entering her striking eyes, Rebecca privately contemplates utilizing her immense resources to initiate an intensive, kingdom-wide search to finally locate her beloved reincarnated husband from a previous lifetime. Politely coughing to respectfully break her peaceful reverie, a sharply dressed aide deeply apologizes for the abrupt interruption, grimly informing her that the pressing, underlying crisis hasn't been genuinely resolved in the slightest. Delivering a staggering, terrifying intelligence report, the aide reveals that because extravagant assets are strictly forbidden within the Holy Temple, the cunning Miss Charlotte mercilessly liquidated every expensive gift wrested from the second prince, actively utilizing those massive illicit funds to begin ruthlessly crushing Lady Rebecca. Widening in absolute, profoundly horrified shock, the lady's brilliant eyes tremble as the sheer, unadulterated gravity of her rival's malicious, highly illegal financial warfare finally registers in her racing mind. Bitterly berating her own temporary, pathetic weakness, Rebecca realizes how catastrophically foolish she was to harbor even a fleeting, completely unearned moment of genuine sympathy for the ruthlessly vindictive Charlotte. A sharply dressed informant enthusiastically validates Onyx's dire report, confirming that the dangerous mystery girl has intentionally forged deep connections with black market underworld merchants, as absolutely no legitimate trader would ever dare touch the incredibly risky job of fencing stolen noble possessions. Sweating over the dreadful realization that their new adversary is a hardened professional criminal heavily tied to violently unpredictable underworld elements, Rebecca panics internally over triggering her catastrophic game-ending flags, instantly discarding her previous plan to idly leave Charlotte's escalating treason entirely to Prince Garrett. As a terrifying, incredibly loud crack echoes through the room from her violently clenched fist, Emma coldly suggests permanently eliminating the troublesome saintess candidate, a murderous proposition Rebecca immediately and fiercely rejects, vehemently declaring she absolutely refuses to descend into becoming a true villainess. Gripping the wooden window frame so incredibly tightly that her knuckles turn bone white, Rebecca vigorously fights off an icy wave of goosebumps, her mind racing furiously to formulate a bloodless yet brutally effective countermeasure against the encroaching darkness. Turning back with a dangerously poised, utterly predatory smile, the noblewoman sarcastically declares her absolute, undeniable obligation to respond properly to such a brazen, graciously hostile invitation to all-out financial war. Springing swiftly into decisive, highly calculated action, Rebecca's elite personal intelligence organization, the Shadows, rapidly executes a highly coordinated, deep-cover preliminary investigation into the murky criminal underworld. Infiltrating a bustling local bakery while completely disguised as ordinary, unassuming townsfolk, the highly trained covert operatives quickly discover that the shadowy conspiracy runs far deeper and is significantly more complex than anyone initially expected. Escalating the shadow war after intense, highly classified strategic consultation, they aggressively mobilize the family patriarch's entire, incredibly lethal intelligence network, Yami, to ruthlessly dig up every hidden financial connection lurking behind the illicit black market liquidations. Wasting absolutely no time upon receiving the highly explosive intelligence report, Rebecca immediately utilizes the Howard family's official channels to urgently contact the elite, heavily armed guards formally dispatched straight from the royal palace. Laying the final, brilliant trap, the aide smoothly informs the royal contacts that Lady Rebecca intends to travel completely incognito in exactly 3 days to test a sensitive new product, specifically requesting only a single accompanying guard to ensure her risky, high-stakes experiment remains entirely undetected. Rebecca that his deliberately suspicious phrasing is a calculated ploy to leak information to a spy, advising her to simply overlook the upcoming provocative performance. Overjoyed by the thrilling prospect of a new venture for House Howard, an eager individual enthusiastically volunteers to participate, extremely curious about what specific field this covert operation will cover. Assuring absolute confidentiality regarding the development of personal safety devices for women, a corrupt official hints at shady backroom dealings and promises a handsome reward from House Howard if the venture succeeds. Praising the highly successful setup, an impeccably dressed man informs Lady Rebecca that all future attacks can now be effortlessly dismissed as mere field experiments for their new product development. Preparing for their covert operation, Lady Rebecca notes that both she and Emma have fully disguised themselves in casual townsfolk attire to maintain strict incognito status. Inspecting the newly completed self-defense tools, Rebecca warmly thanks Emma for ensuring the specialized gadgets were manufactured perfectly on schedule. Boarding a carriage cleverly disguised as a common hired cab, the disguised noblewoman decisively commands her expedition to finally depart. Kicking off the elaborate trap, the Howard family guard masquerading as a panicked coachman suddenly shouts for help, successfully baiting the lurking assailants into revealing their position in the dense woods. Startled by the premature screaming before they even initiate their ambush, the hooded assassins step out of the foliage exactly as planned, prompting a disguised ally to smugly compliment the flawless theatrical production. Laughing heartily from the driver's seat, the disguised coachman enthusiastically wishes Lady Rebecca the best of luck with her rigorous combat training as she boldly steps down from the carriage. Surrounding the disguised noblewoman with predatory grins, the crude bandits mockingly identify her as the infamous Moon Princess, leeringly noting that she is far more attractive than the prevailing rumors suggested. Annoyed by the grossly inaccurate moniker, Rebecca flatly corrects the gloating thugs, coldly informing them that she has absolutely never gone by such an embarrassingly poetic name. Undeterred by her icy correction, the lead bandit gleefully confirms she is indeed their designated target, drawing a lamentable but entirely expected sigh from the heavily targeted noblewoman. Harboring the accumulated wisdom of a 60-year-old soul, Rebecca internally chuckles at the sheer absurdity of the situation, finding the childish arrogance of the grown men threatening her strangely endearing. Brandishing his blade with a sickening smirk, the assassin cruelly promises not to kill her, instead threatening to inflict enough horrific humiliation to make her actively wish for death. Unfazed by their disgusting threats, Rebecca narrows her eyes and fiercely demands if the ignorant thugs truly understand exactly who they are brazenly attacking. Laughing off her intense glare, the confident thugs mockingly recount her exposed crimes and imminent exile, sneeringly identifying her as the wicked ex-fiancée who maliciously bewitched the second prince. Seizing upon their fatal intelligence failure, Rebecca swiftly corrects their deeply flawed assumptions by coldly revealing that her royal engagement to the second prince actually remains entirely intact and legally undissolved. Driving her point home with absolute, terrifying clarity, she informs the suddenly trembling assassins that they have just committed high treason by violently assaulting a woman holding a position entirely equivalent to absolute royalty. Flashing a chillingly serene smile while staring down their drawn swords, Rebecca joyfully declares her legal right to ruthlessly eliminate them using the full, devastating extent of her magical strength. Panicking at the horrific realization of their massive blunder, the assassins desperately try to backtrack and halt the fight, but Rebecca sharply orders them to shut their mouths as she eagerly prepares her counterattack. Moving with terrifying speed and precision, the supposedly frail noblewoman fiercely clashes with the bewildered bandits, easily overpowering their crude physical strikes with her refined combat skills. Screaming in sheer panic, the bandit leader desperately commands his men to attack, only to be instantly blinded by a massive, debilitating blast of chemical spray erupting directly into his face. Capitalizing on their agonizing disorientation, Emma viciously delivers a brutal, high-impact kick, effortlessly subduing another stunned assailant with bone-crushing physical force. Standing triumphantly amidst the groaning thugs, Rebecca proudly introduces her utterly incapacitated attackers to the devastating anti-crime gadget she and Emma meticulously developed just to pass the time. Brandishing the small, elegantly crafted cylindrical device, she dramatically reveals its highly deceptive, remarkably cute name as the Repel Bear. Firing a concentrated stream of debilitating fluid directly into a bandit's eyes, Rebecca ignores Emma's frantic warning to carefully verify which specific experimental poison she is actually deploying in the heat of battle. Exasperated by her maid's impossible demands for strict scientific methodology during a chaotic melee, Rebecca stubbornly refuses to pause, declaring she will simply handle the remaining 2 targets herself. Several minutes later, Emma crouches analytically over a violently vomiting assassin, calmly noting that the chemical stimulus appears slightly too strong and casually suggesting an immediate formula adjustment. Prodding the sobbing, severely incapacitated thug, Emma cheerfully demands a detailed description of the pain's exact quality and intensity to successfully complete her rigorous clinical evaluation. Intervening before her maid can fully interrogate the agonizing victim, Rebecca clinically evaluates the weapon's physical flaws, noting that the rapid-fire function and splashback range desperately requires significant improvement. Writhing in miserable agony on the forest floor, the thoroughly defeated thugs bitterly lament being utterly tricked by their treacherous client regarding their target's incredibly dangerous royal status. Activating a soothing healing spell on a bruised bandit, Rebecca sternly lectures them that regardless of a woman's social standing, accepting a cowardly assassination contract is fundamentally unjustifiable. Touched by her shockingly merciful healing magic, the weeping thugs genuinely repent, with one tearfully noting that being scolded by the incredibly powerful noblewoman feels oddly comforting and deeply maternal. Snapping out of his emotional breakdown, the lead bandit desperately offers crucial intelligence, revealing that the treacherous client is currently waiting for them at the infamous birdcage of love in just up the road. Gently patting a highly disappointed Emma who desperately wanted to unleash a full bloodbath, a disguised ally smoothly compliments Lady Rebecca on her utterly flawless, terrifyingly effective performance. Arriving at the notorious inn that originally served as the stage for a disastrous game rout, Rebecca glares at the building and fiercely resolves to end this wretched pilgrimage as quickly as possible. Confirming their target's exact location with a sharp, determined focus, Rebecca notes that the establishment's exceptional soundproofing makes it the absolute perfect venue for a highly thorough, uninterrupted discussion with Miss Charlotte. Staring intensely through a crack in the heavy curtains, the noblewoman quietly reflects that despite their bitter rivalry, she has never actually bared her heart or spoken honestly with the deeply troubled girl. Snapping to deadly attention as light footsteps echo in the hall, a maid formally announces the highly anticipated arrival of the rogue saintess candidate. Mingling effortlessly in the bustling tavern below, the disguised guards easily deflect the rowdy patron's attention, quietly confirming that the infamous Moon Princess is securely isolated upstairs. Pressing her ear excitedly against the heavy wooden door, the oblivious Charlotte Silva cheerfully wonders if the illicit meeting has already begun, completely unaware of the terrifying trap awaiting her inside. Greeting her bitter enemy with a chillingly beautiful, highly victorious smile, Rebecca raises a delicate glass vial and formally introduces the potent truth serum she meticulously crafted alongside Emma.